What is the most valuable resource someone has? Their time? Their money? No. It's their attention. Our attention is the single most valuable resource of the 20th century. Think of one problem the world is facing today. Global warming, geopolitical conflicts, economic downturn. Any one of these issues can be fixed.
So the Bank of Canada is hiking its key lending rate once again in an attempt to cool inflation.
President Biden is using the moment to condemn the war in Ukraine.
As long as we decide to pay attention to them. The key is that we have to pay, because the attention we have is a finite resource. Trying to pay attention to everything literally means you're simultaneously paying attention to nothing. Ultimately, what you choose to pay attention to directs your life. So for who controls your attention controls the course of humanity. I have a serious problem, an addiction. A social media addiction. I can't have a conversation, sit through a movie, make it through dinner, or even drive my car more than a couple blocks. Very dangerous. Without checking social media. All day, every day, I thumb through social media like it's my job. And I don't even mean that figuratively. I mean that literally. My average screen time last week for social media was 7 to 8 hours a day. 7 to 8 fucking hours. A literal full-time job. Not even considering the health implications, there is no way spending that much time on these apps is making me a better athlete, a better student, or a better person. So from today on, October 1st, 2022, I'm deleting all social media apps off my phone. There is only one rule to this challenge. I am only not allowed to use any of the social media apps on my phone. That means if I want to search up the webpage or use them on my iPad, that is totally fair game. The goal of this 30-day experiment is just to make accessing social media less convenient. My hope is that by doing so, it'll curb my usage because, well, the web version of all those social media platforms literally suck when compared to the app, and I'm allowing the iPad because most of the social media platforms aren't optimized for it, so its experience is significantly worse than that of a phone. And also because of its size and weight, and the fact that it has to be connected to the internet, it makes checking social media really inconvenient. And unless I want to become an iPad kid, I don't really see myself using it that often. The first 2 days of this experiment was definitely the hardest. I couldn't go more than 30 minutes without picking up my phone before realizing there was nothing for me to do on that. I was like a nicotine addict going through withdrawal. It's difficult to realize just how plugged in and often I checked social media until I literally couldn't. Most of the time, there wasn't even anything interesting happening on those platforms. It was more the anticipation of something happening that kept me returning over and over and over again. Okay, that isn't entirely true because I also had YouTube constantly playing in the background, regardless of where I was and what I was doing. Cooking, cleaning, showering, driving, sleeping. The list goes on. Didn't matter when or where, YouTube was always there. I used it as a crutch to run away from my thoughts, to run away from the problems that I didn't want to think about. The thing about running away from your problems is eventually you'll have to deal with them. In the long run, dealing with them right away is healthier, but in the short run, running away is easier. So, I ran, and ran, and ran, and ran. Until I woke up feeling drained and tired every morning, feeling completely stuck and unmotivated. Emotional baggage is heavier and hard to deal with than any busy and hectic schedule because it's like a vampire that just drains your life away. At the time, I was dealing with a pretty brutal breakup. It hurt, and I didn't want to admit it. I couldn't. How could I admit something that I didn't even want to think about? There was a lack of communication between the two of us, and I put the blame solely on myself because I should have been the one to initiate that conversation. But instead, I procrastinated and found comfort in YouTube. I found comfort in the beautiful false reality seen in those videos and used it as a crutch. Once that crutch was gone, the full weight of my thoughts and feelings, the ones that I've been putting off, crushed me. I was going through the feedback loop from hell, where my emotions perpetually went through incredible highs and lows until I couldn't feel anything anymore. I didn't want to feel anything anymore. I just wanted silence. day 3 was like a light switch. Something in me clicked, and the feedback loop stopped. All that remained was silence and peace. We did eventually sit down and talk about how we were feeling. We talked about what upset us and reminisced over the good times. I don't think that would have happened if I didn't delete social media. Things really settled down, and eventually I lost the desire to be constantly inundated with new information and entertainment. In that week, I also managed to surprise my best friend, freak her family out, and make her coworkers think I was a stalker, as well as completely butcher an Instagram story because I was trying to do it through the web browser rather than through the app. So all in all, pretty successful, but if I'm being 100% honest here, I did re-download Snapchat while I was on my trip because I needed to contact a friend who I didn't have their number at the time. It was just like for a brief instant, but it still counts as breaking the rules, so I thought I should mention it. By week 2, I stopped missing social media altogether. I did get the occasional bit of FOMO, but I rarely ever checked any of the platforms on my computer or on my iPad. If I did, it was no longer than 5 minutes. One of the things that I was genuinely worried about heading into this experiment was how it would affect my social life, especially as a university student. I thought that by leaving those platforms, I'd be missing out on social events and group gatherings, but to my surprise, none of that actually happened. It's mainly because I don't have any friends. Okay, it's actually because everybody who would already want to make plans with me has my number, so not being on those platforms actually doesn't affect their ability to contact me. The only time I found it a little inconvenient not being able to access my Instagram easily was on the weekend of the second week. It was a competition weekend, and some of the people that was trying to make plans with me didn't have my number. As a result, my response time to urgent texts was embarrassingly sluggish. I'll be honest, week 3 is where the train went off the tracks slow. I got terribly sick after returning from my trip, and once again, I found myself turning to YouTube to use it as a crutch. I had it constantly playing in the background because I just needed that noise to distract myself from how terrible I was feeling. It felt like I was taking 1 step forward and 2 steps back because I was almost at the same spot I was when I started this experiment. Luckily, I didn't sink low enough to re-download any of the apps, but I did really come close to twice. As I progressed further and further along this experiment, I began to realize just how mindless my social media consumption was. The next time you're on the train or waiting in line for something, take a look around. Everyone will be on their phones, simply because it's the easiest way to distract their minds from the boring and the mundane, to hide the ugly and see the unimaginable. Don't get me wrong, I am definitely not a part of the solution here. If anything, by posting on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube, I am exacerbating the problem. But for all the frustrations, distractions, and insecurities that social media causes, it's really good at doing its one job, which is connecting us to those that we care about. It's not the tool that is flawed, but the way that we use it. What would happen if we slowed down and took the time to find the beauty in the ordinary? Wouldn't that be better than looking at the images that are illuminated on the back of an LCD panel? As week 4 and this experiment wrapped up, the question of how I should consume media persisted. Deleting social media hardly affected my social life. If anything, it made me more present and noticed the minute details that would have otherwise gone unnoticed. So after these 30 days, will I be re-downloading social media? No. In fact, I want to see how far I can push this idea of intentional consumption and get rid of my phone entirely for the next month. I am a little bit afraid, but I think this hard reset is the only way I can take back control of my attention and redirect it to things that I actually care about. So for the month of November, I'll be switching to a Nokia. See you then.